Now, a lot of our audience. Now, you voted for Sanders, I think, right? In
the Democratic primary, yeah. And I did it. I did it again in 2020. Yeah. I fell for it twice. Yeah.
So it may surprise you because I get the sense that you're horrified by the prospect of Donald Trump. I would say that your work has radicalized more people that I know away from the two-party system than any other living author. I cannot tell you how many people. Yes, I cannot tell you how many people have told me that they read Listen Liberal, and that was it.
Yeah,
they were done with that entire system.
Maybe they have the courage of my convictions in a way
that's where the question's going.
Yeah,
indeed.
Yeah.
Right. How do you feel about the fact? Because it seems like you still do want to remain within that system, but critique it. Whereas I think a lot of people who have read your work have taken it as a signal that the system is hopeless. And particularly with the people
I don't disagree with that. I wouldn't say hopeless, but I am. I mean, come on! You've read what I have to say. This is one screwed up system. My wager, if you will, when I wrote "What's the Matter with Kansas," and then even more so when I wrote "Listen Liberal," the wager was, the idea was, you show these people the error of their ways, and they're politicians. They want to win, right? They like winning. You show them the error of their ways, and they'll be like, that's right. We need to change what we're doing. Now, what I didn't, and now I'm 58 and I know better. That is not, that's like, I might as well flap my arms and fly to the moon. It's like, that's not how you change the way these people behave. They don't really care if they win by, they like being in the majority. They like winning, but they don't want to do the things that they have to do to win, like overwhelmingly, like the Democrats used to do, right. Which our parents knew about. We now, it's just a distant, fading memory now. When they were, they held the House of Representatives from 1930 until 1994, with only two brief intermissions, where the Republicans got in for one session at a time back in the 50s. Other than that, they had the most incredible winning streak in U.S. history. And Roosevelt and Truman won by these incredible margins, and you look at Lyndon Johnson in 1964. So I was born in 1965, right along with the decline, right when the decline begins. And, they are incapable of doing anything like that anymore. And frankly, they like being the party that they are, a party that can never replicate those triumphs. But they can't replicate those triumphs, but they are the apple of the funders, the billionaires' eye.
Right.
And for them, that's very important in a place like Washington. They are, nobody wants to be. This is a very wealthy city. It takes a lot of money to live, sort of, pleasant lifestyle, middle-class lifestyle here. They like being those people. They like being the apple of the billionaire's eye. That's fine. And if it means that they barely eke out a win, or that the House of Representatives goes back and forth and the Senate goes back and forth, and they no longer can, so be it. And it means you can never, you'll never get national health care. It's like Obama, right? Where they all their grand plans came to nothing. It wasn't even clear they really had grand plans. And the entire press corps then builds, a gigantic theory for why the Democratic Party can never do anything. And that's the best we can ever hope for. It's absolutely infuriating. And here I am laughing about it, right?
We laugh about it all the time. It's part of our chart.
There's a bunch of different ways to talk about this. One of them is you then what does Mr. Frank think we should do instead? Two options. One is build a third party, and the other is do something to take over one of the two parties. And I suspect that the second choice is the only way that anything is ever going to happen, because By the way, are you guys ready for this? We're going to talk for hours. If you let me go, I will talk for. I will talk.
You told me you had an hour to 9. That's all. Yeah. You know what? 9 o'clock. I'll talk for as long as you want.
I could see 10 minutes in. Oh yeah, so that cute little list you had of questions.
Yeah. Out.
Toss that aside. Here we go.
This is what I find. This is what I find to be perplexing, and if I'm being honest, a little bit frustrating. Is that despite this body of work, you keep returning to this idea that the Democratic Party is worth reforming, or that it's more feasible, like reforming the Democratic Party is more feasible than building a third party. And one of my questions that I had on my list was that now you have the Greens poised to nominate a star of sorts. I mean, not a huge star, but Cornel West is a pretty big name.
Hey, he's already
registering pretty well in some early polls. He's already cracking more than 5% in some early polls. Yeah. Not only do I see potential in his candidacy to really just shake up the two-party system and break the sort of duopoly in a way if he can register enough support. But also, and I know that polling always says, voters always say that they might vote for a third party a year before the vote, and then they always come home to one of the two. But not in these kinds of numbers. We have never seen these kinds of numbers where 47% of voters say they would consider a third party. Or you add a nameless third party candidate to Biden-Trump, it registers 30%. The third party option actually beats Trump in a three-way race. I know it's early.
Awesome.
Let's say those numbers decrease by 2/3 or 3/4. You're still talking about huge potential for a third party this year, because it's likely going to be two failed incumbents going back to back. There's no better time for a third party to run and say, we've literally tried both of these guys. So given
good.
all that, I just would ask, why? Why do you think option 2 is better?
We're gonna have to wait and see until the actual election. I'm actually a huge fan of Cornel West. You should go back and read the interview I did with him about. It was when Obama was president. It was in Salon.com, and it was it 2014, something like that. Anyhow, it's one of the best interviews I've ever done. The guy's amazing. He has such a way with words. I love listening to him, and he and I agree on the issues. Like almost, I like him a lot. So that would obviously he would be I would be very attracted to him as a candidate. Now, and the last time that a third party candidate really made a big splash like this was Ross Perot back in 92, and swung the election to Bill Clinton, almost certainly. I mean, we don't know, of course, but almost certainly did that. The thing about Perot wasn't exactly my cup of tea. I hate to admit it. I think I voted for Bill Clinton that year. Isn't that shameful? It's. But
I share your shame.
Anyhow, the thing about a third party,
I was 5 years old when Bill Clinton got elected, so I can't blame me.
The thing about a third party is what I mean when I'm talking about that is I mean, there's third parties. I want to see one that is a full-blown party, not just a guy running for president, but a party that has, that has a presence in every state, at every line on the ballot, that is fielding candidates for the Senate, the House, and is at the head of a mass movement. I mean, what I mean by that is that has a chance to win. And the last time we saw that in this country was, in fact, populism in the 1890s. And they were, Kansas had two different populist governors. We had a whole bunch of senators who were populists, members of Congress. And so did all the nearby states, Nebraska, the Dakotas, Oklahoma wasn't a state yet, but all over the Midwest, all over the South, you saw this happening. And it was a real third party. And once they, and I would love to see that again. Don't get me wrong; that would be like the best thing ever. I am your man if we can build something like that. And one of the reasons that's important is because our two-party system is massively dysfunctional in all sorts of ways. Now, the political scientists, they don't like to write about this because they like the two-party system. They think that it gets us to the golden mean or the median voter, whatever the hell they have some stupid ass term for it. But one of the things it actually does is the parties will periodically refuse to debate really important issues. And it takes a third party to come in and smash the system apart and make them debate the most important issue of the day. So classic example, slavery. The two parties refused to debate slavery in the years leading up to the Civil War. The Democrats and the Whigs, they wouldn't do it. You had to have a third party come in and just break that system apart with a sledgehammer. And that was the Republicans. That's where they came from. They were a third party. And they succeeded, and the existing second party, the Whigs, died. And then in the late 19th century, the two parties, the Republicans and Democrats, refused to debate industrialization and inequality. They wouldn't talk about it. What was happening? They wouldn't. Neither one of them would give, anything. They wouldn't give the time of day to the labor movement. And this is the country was having riots and strikes, and it was close to civil war. A lot of people thought at the time, but they wouldn't debate it. And so the populists had this opening, and they came in and took it. And in that case, what happened was the third party, the populists, got absorbed by the Democrats, or a lot of them did. And I told this whole story, and the people know. The Democrats nominated a guy who talked like a populist, kind of imitated the populist act. And a lot of them went along with it. A lot of the rest of them went over to the Socialist Party. But anyhow, populism died out. And when it died out, this is the point I was getting to. I'm kind of encyclopedic about these things, and I apologize. When it died out,
that's what you're here for.
As soon as they had killed it, the two major parties passed laws in all of these different states to ensure that you would never have something like this happen again. That's where Jim Crow comes from, by the way, in the South. Jim Crow was, this is not me saying this, there's all of these American historians that have studied it. Populism, the idea was to bring together black farmers and white farmers who were sharecroppers at the time. In a lot of southern states, blacks could still vote back then. And this was absolutely terrifying to the southern elite who were Democrats at the time. Absolutely terrifying. And they knew that this was the Achilles heel of their whole system, and they had to come up with a way to make sure that it never happened again. And that was the origins of Jim Crow, was to make sure that you never had a movement like that happen. And in places like Kansas, they passed laws against what's called fusion voting. So a third party, one of the tactics the populists used to use was they would cross-endorse with the Democratic Party. So the Democrats would choose some guy, and the populists would say, yeah, he's all right, we'll endorse him. And then the populists would choose another candidate, and the Democrats would endorse him. So the candidate would appear on two different party ballot lines, and in this way would beat the Republicans, who have always been the dominant party in a place like Kansas. Well, you can't do that anymore. Not for any good reason, not for any constitutional, it's just illegal. And the funny thing is there's only a few states where it's not illegal, and those states still have good, robust third-party action, like New York State. Don't you guys still have the Working Families Party?
We have the Working Families
awesome.
Party,
but
sorry, I don't know a lot about them. I don't live there. I'm sorry.
They're useless.
They're an arm of the Democrats.
Okay, sorry, that sucks.
They just funnel everybody to the Democrats.
The system deeply needs some kind of corrective on the two-party system. We have to have it, but we don't have it now. And the problem is that the deck is stacked against us getting it. That leaves the other alternative smashing one of the two parties. And the hopeful note here is that Trump did just that to the Republicans. They remember Jeb Bush? Do you remember this? They did everything they could to stop that guy, and he wrecked their party. And I laughed a lot about it at the time. I thought this is I never thought I would see the day, right? That this happens to the Republicans of all people. Like they were almost like a military organization back in remember the George Bush era? And they just crumbled, I would love to see that happen within the Democratic Party, but
but it can't, because Russell, do me a favor.
I have no
grab
idea.
that book over your right shoulder, that book with the yellow cover. Grab that book. I want to show him that book. I want to recommend that book to him.
Okay.
Yes, you should give that book a read sometime. It's not going to happen. These people are shallow, incurious, they're stupid, they're selfish, they have no real politics.
True. All of that's
so
true.
It's impossible. Yes. It's not possible.
They have super delegates, and also
look.
remember
I mean, it would be tough. Now, let me throw out one more thing, one more factor here that you guys have to consider, which is the other place in American history where reform comes from, and that's social movements. And that is something that they can't stop. And social movements are the winning hand in our political history. So the populism grew out of a farmers. It was a mass movement. It was millions and millions and millions of people, and it was called the Farmers Alliance. Doesn't really matter anymore, but it was probably the biggest mass movement the country's ever seen in a per capita sense. In the 30s, the reforms came out of, well, you had all that organizing from the farmers back then, but by then you also had a very robust labor movement that was out there in the streets every day, demanding, making people's voices, and these were incredibly successful movements. The civil rights movement is a third, incredibly successful. And you can build a movement like that. Now, that is tough. It is hard. But we have the internet now. It's very fertile terrain out there. People are so pissed off. And social movements work. Okay? One other thing, the Democratic Party, when Franklin Roosevelt came along, they were awful. This was like, you guys, if we were alive back then, we would have nothing to do with the Democratic Party. This was a dreadful political organization. And they completely turned it on its head very quickly. Now, it took a Great Depression to do that. But
let me ask you something, because we have someone like Shama Sawant, which, by the way, program note, everybody, we're going to be interviewing Shama a week from this evening, August 9th. She has worker strike back going now. Obviously, they are trying to rally the UPS workers to vote no on their tentative contract now to try and get a better deal. She's working on rent control measures in Seattle right now. She's been very, very firm in her commitment not to associate with the Democratic Party. I don't know if you've heard Chris Hedges make this point, but he's made this point that when the Democrats turn their back on workers as profoundly as they have, and such distrust grows between workers and the party, it's very difficult to build a mass working class movement as long as you are attached and associated to the Democratic Party, because they have every reason not to trust a movement that ties itself to the party in that way because of NAFTA, which I don't have to tell you about. I mean, you talked to Bill Maher about that. We were going to play that clip for you, actually.
I'm very familiar with, believe me. So in 2016, I toured the country talking about how the Democratic Party has betrayed workers, right? That's the theme of Listen Liberal, and
that's also when you disappeared from MSNBC.
Exactly. I haven't been on the media. I haven't been in the media in this country maybe a handful of times since that book came out. Isn't that just the most amazing thing? I'll tell you a funny story. So I wrote this. For me, that the 2016 election was, it was a really ugly contest and everything, but it was clear to me that Trump had a shot, and remember the New York Times said it was 95% for Hillary, all this nonsense. And I wrote this essay. Well, I wrote the Trump wins essay. I don't know if you guys remember this. It was in the Guardian. It's admittedly a British newspaper, and they published it as soon as the AP. I wrote the thing the week before the election, and they published it the moment the AP called the election for Trump. And it was a really good essay. It was solid. It was well researched. It had all the links. It was one of the best things I've ever written. And the Times and the Post hadn't prepared it, or apparently hadn't prepared anything. They were so convinced that he didn't have a chance. And so for me, this is the what a triumph, what a journalistic triumph. Like, I win, right? And you know what I win? Exactly. No, I did a tour of Australia on the strength of that one article. I was on the radio in New Zealand. I was on the radio in Canada. I went to France. I was on I forget which French national radio. They never have Americans on that. And but in America, nothing, zero. It's the weirdest goddamn thing.
Well, they did that around the same time. They did that to you. They did that to Matt Taibbi. They did that to Glenn Greenwald right around that time.
Yeah.
Because Trump winning terrified them.
Yeah, but I always said I'm not a Trump supporter, but I can understand his appeal, which is like apparently. Well, not apparently, which is they cannot. Yeah,
they can't.
They still can't. They still can't. And that by itself is really fascinating. By the way, so I say I'm out of the political business, but I think that the time is going to come when somebody has to write the history of the last, since 2016. It's just this country has gone absolutely nuts. We refuse to understand what's happening. It's right in front of our eyes. It's in our face every minute, and we refuse to understand it. How can we be in denial like that? It is truly one of the, it's so fascinating. I feel like I have to get back into it, but anyhow. That's for another time.
Look, don't please. That's
for a DueDissidence in the year 2030.
Look, I think to truly not be in denial at this point is to understand that the plane is crashing into the mountain, that this system is beyond reform. It's FUBAR. And the question is, what do we do after it collapses? That's the main reason why I think it is, just an outrageous waste of time and waste of effort, and actually, a great misdirection of resources and energy and thought to invest in reforming the Democratic Party. I think now is a time that we have to start thinking about, okay, what comes next? On what terms do we want to rebuild a system after this one fails? Because it's gone. It's gone. Well, and I feel like your work leads people to that conclusion. And part of what people don't understand about you is how you can lead them to that conclusion, and then, come November, go in and vote Democrat again.
Well,
on a hopeful note, for me, reading The People Know, I found it hopeful because it's a series of cases where the populists actually did win.
Yes, they got what they lost in the short term in the 1890s, but they got everything they were after. It took a while. Women got the vote, farmers got the farm program. It took a while, but we went off the gold standard, which was a great triumph. Yeah, and the same happened again in the 30s, and the civil rights movement had their oh my God, they got the two monumental civil rights bills. These are all triumphs. I should also say that in the context of 2016. And 2020, you did have Bernie Sanders in the race, and he was reforming the Democratic Party from within was actually what he was trying to do. And it was in contrast to, and I had voted for Nader in 2000, a little bit scarred by that. I'm an admirer of Ralph Nader, liked what he was saying. I'm not one of those who thinks that he caused Al Gore to lose the election. I think Al Gore lost that election all on his own. But at the same time, I felt a little burned by that whole experience. And I was really excited for what Sanders was doing, which was basically Ralph Nader's politics, even better than Ralph Nader's politics, but doing it within the Democratic Party. And oh my God, he came goddamn close. People don't remember this now, but he gave them a scare when he won the New Hampshire primary, et cetera, et cetera.
In 2016, I think he gave them a scare. Okay, so here's my kind of version of how things went down. In 2016, he was able to give them a bit of a scare because a real wave of independent populist types flocked to him in the primary. And then a lot of those voters went on and voted for Trump. And then Trump won, which meant 4 years later in 2020, they weren't going to come back into the Democratic Party primary and vote for Bernie. They were Trump people. They had already branded themselves.
I'm afraid they're
and
lost.
For that reason, that was why the 2020 campaign had this different character to it. People said this feels more milquetoast. It feels more normie. Well, it had to be because there was no influx of populist, grubby independents coming in to vote for Bernie because they all went to Trump. So he had to run a more normie campaign within the Democratic Party, which is why he peaked at about 33% in 2020 as opposed to to 47% in 2016 because a lot of his movement was literally filtered out of the party in 2016. They were no longer accessible to him in 2020. 4 years down the road after Biden wins, we're in an even worse spot to take over the Democratic Party. These people own it now. I mean, there's no grabbing it from them now. To the point where these do-gooder liberals that you talk about, they said, oh, yeah, we're for Medicare for all. Yeah, absolutely. What, 90% of Democrats support Medicare for all, but only 30% vote for it because the 60% who supported but didn't vote for it don't need it. And they're the ones who own the party. So fuck them. Fuck them and fuck the whole country, to be honest with you. I don't care if Trump wins. I'm not afraid of Trump winning at all. And that's the attitude I think you really have to take.
Well, wow.
My cards are on the table.
I'm sorry. What should I say to that? I wonder what they're going to do. I wonder what you guys think about Biden. I mean, so I'm here in DC, or I'm in the Beltway, anyways, and it's kind of a guessing game. It's like a parlor game here. How do you think they're going to play it? Because Biden he's got like the lowest approval rating ever recorded, or something. Have you seen this? It's
yes.
I mean, like, yes, and yes. He's looking more and more frail as the days go by. His what's he going to do? And it's not looking like, even though Trump is indicted, and all these different blah 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 blah. Isn't it just? It's insane. I don't know what he's going to do, but they are desperately afraid of an open primary. I think desperately afraid. So they have to come up with a system for passing the torch from one to another, like Obama did to Hillary. And do you remember how they were? I even got in audiences would get pissed off at me for shit. I even once got a death threat for saying something critical about Hillary Clinton. Can you imagine that? It was on.
Was it from Hillary Clinton?
No. It was on Facebook of all things. It was like it's the dumbest thing in the world. But there was this sense that there shouldn't be an opponent to Hillary Clinton. She was not the incumbent, remember? She was not the sitting president. But there was this sense that you got that people did not have a right to run against her, and that Bernie was somehow illegitimate for that reason. And so they want to repeat that kind of operation. So, but they want to hand the torch from Biden to somebody without allowing for another free-for-all primary within the Democratic Party.
Well, that's an interesting point because that's... Sorry, go ahead, Russell.
In the normal course of things, they would hand it off to Kamala. But they absolutely...
That's not going to work, though.
It's not going to work because they absolutely insisted, as they tend to do, on ignoring all of the evidence with this really inflated belief that they can still dictate opinion in a way that they cannot if they ever had that much control. It certainly waned. People didn't like her before. They don't like her now. They've been trying to make Kamala happen for years. She's not going to happen. And they finally realized that.
Yeah. So I don't know who they're going to pass it to. It doesn't look like Mayor Pete is a starter either. I mean,
a lot of people are saying Newsom.
Oh my God. Oh, anyhow, so this is, I hate this kind of speculation. I shouldn't have encouraged it, and I apologize, and I take it back. And every now and then I wake up and Keaton, I've got exactly I share your sentiments
trust your
exactly.
Instincts. Trust your instincts. When you wake up, that's when those testosterone levels are highest. That's when you're at your most focused. You have your most faculties about you. You got to trust those instincts because
and I wake up and I'm pissed off. I wake up going, oh.
Well, exactly. Well, look, I mean, but in all seriousness, are we in a place? I know you have to go in a moment. Are we in a place? At what point do we feel we have nothing to lose? Right. That's the real question.
That's okay. Fair enough. And look, there are millions of people who share that. Exactly what you're saying. I know that they're absolutely furious. So we could have this conversation over again and do it in a completely different direction. But I often remind people of what the small town Midwest looks like. And this is the great repository of national virtue, Frank Capra movies, whatever. It's in ruins everywhere you go, unless it's a college town or a town with a hospital in it or a town with a prison in it. It's the small town is a wreck. It's, the buildings are all boarded up. Sometimes the boards have gone because they got put up 20 years ago. It's a ruin. And with the exception of like certain neighborhoods in Kansas City where the creative class, the quote unquote creative class, the Clintons people where they live, the cities are like that as well. Everybody can see this. The promise of American life, name a famous book from long ago, has disappeared for a huge part of this country's population. The Great Society that Lyndon Johnson used to talk about and that Martin Luther King aspired to join, right? Gone. This was something that was very real in the 1960s, the great middle class society that we were all going to join one of these days. That dream, that hope is completely gone for so many people. And they have a sense of bitterness that is hard to put into words. And it's apparently the only, and Trump speaks to it.
Yes.
Much as I hate to admit it. And the Democratic Party, which should be the natural, right? The party of Roosevelt, party of Bryan, party of Johnson, et cetera, should be the ones who are out in front of this, but they aren't. They can't figure it out. They've become this different beast. We're not going to talk about that now because your viewers obviously know about that. I don't know what's going to happen. It's not a good situation when, it's a dreadful situation. I don't have any answers. Here, now, what can I say to really make people start to cry here now that we're turning it off? Well, it's an absolutely shitty situation. I don't know how, I don't know what the answer to it is. My crystal ball has gone foggy. I can't tell what's going to happen. And right now it looks like God. I'm not going to say it. Okay.
Well,
no, I'm done.
What were you going to say?
I think a Trump second term looks likely.
All right. Well, there's nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing to be afraid of.
He's something to be afraid of.
I don't think so. Look, what I would say is when you speak to that level of hopelessness, that level of despair, because I started out the 2020 cycle somewhat radicalized, but I was not a Bernie or Buster at the start of that cycle. I was convinced that Trump was worth getting rid of. But then a couple of people talked to me. They said, when you talk about people who need medical debt cancellation in order to live, in order to keep a roof over their head, or people who need universal health care or need their student debt forgiven or need these things that Bernie's talking about, if they stand up and say, okay, we are willing to go all in for this and threaten the Democrats with annihilation if they don't capitulate. This narrative that the PNC...
That's what's been happening. That is de facto what has been happening since, for years. And that's the message of what's the matter with Kansas and the message of Listen Liberal. And that message never got through. The message
at a certain point, look, my wife works at a hospital. We're not poor, right? You're obviously not a poor man. Russell is not a poor man either.
Look at all those books.
Look at all those books. At a certain point, I think solidarity with desperate people in desperate need means willing to go all in with them, even if it means sacrificing an uncomfortable situation for us. Now, I personally still don't feel I have much to lose if Trump wins, but if you do, that's fine. I think part of solidarity with these populist type movements means being able to say to the UPS worker who is loading boxes from midnight to 8 in the morning, working Walmart noon to 8 at night, 5 days a week, who's at the end of his rope, part of solidarity with those workers is saying, we are with you in demanding what you need, or else we will let this country burn. And that is what solidarity sounds like to me. Solidarity does not sound like, well, yeah, we're going to try, but then we're going to blink at the last second and give Joe Biden 4 more years because Trump is scary.
Do you think? Yeah. I don't know.
Well, also because of so much of what you talk about in your books, we did try to take over the Democratic Party, but it is so controlled by the liberal class that you describe. It is not takeoverable. Everybody that we sent in there it's like a zombie movie. Everyone we sent in there got turned.
And yet, okay, this has to be the last comment. So I'm not demanding the last word. You guys can go on and on. No. And yet they did take it over. Not us. The white collar, professional class took it over in the 70s. I describe this in Listen Liberal, and not in great detail. I mean, there's people have written that story before. It's totally forgotten now, by the way. I'm always getting emails from members of the public who don't know that story and are astonished to learn that it actually happened. I think I left this out of the book because I thought it was a cliche, but it turns out it's not. Nobody even knows about it. Do you remember Mike Royko, columnist in Chicago? He said when he was writing about this period in history, he was writing at the time. He said anybody that would try to reform the Democratic Party by getting rid of the white ethnic vote, he said it's like starting a diet by shooting yourself in the stomach, and yet that's what they did. That's what they did. And because they, eventually Bill Clinton was able to win, they're like, hey, it was a triumph. It worked. We got our way. And it has been a catastrophe. It has been a disaster. Now, I'm absolutely exhausted. I'm drained. Got to go eat that pizza.
All right.
Thank you so much. Listen,
you don't have pizza in DC. You got to come up to New York. We'll have some pizza.
I had a horrible pizza tonight. The worst pizza I've ever had in my life. I'll tell the audience about that when you're gone, Thomas. But listen, I know we pushed each other around a little bit, but it was sincerely, it was a great honor and a great pleasure to meet you. And I hope we can talk again.
Let's do this again one of these days when we're closer to the to the end point.
Exactly. Right. And you did, just to be clear, you did endorse Cornel West for president in this interview.
Well, I really admire him. He's a great man. It's too early to tell, but he is a great man. Look, I always said if a personal friend of mine or an acquaintance even actually runs for president, I'm kind of bound to vote for the guy, even if he doesn't have a chance, So we'll see. I really like him, though. He's great.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. That's a maybe. That's a maybe.
Yeah, a strong maybe.
A strong maybe. We'll take it.
All right, gentlemen. We'll see you later.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. It was great meeting you, Thomas.
Please clap.